Hey there y'all, it's Megan. If you are returning to my channel, welcome back, and if you're new, welcome aboard. So today I'm going to be doing another one of my Disney trivia history videos because that's one of my favorite things in the world, as we all know. And I had actually planned, and I had researched, and I was all ready to film about Dumbo because the Dumbo live action, I don't even know if we can call it live action. I guess Danny DeVito is a real person. But anyway, since that has just recently come out, I thought that it would be a good idea. And some of you actually requested that I do a video on the original animated Dumbo movie. So that was the plan for today. But then over the weekend, I had an interesting experience that made me want to do a different movie. And that movie is The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. From 1977. So if you are only here to see my embarrassing story, then go to the end of the video. I'll try to put a timestamp here to where I embarrass myself. But if you're here to hear about the Disney history of Winnie the Pooh, then we're going to get started with that right now. So like with so many of Walt's animated films, he started off loving it, and he wanted to create a movie about it because he saw the enjoyment that it brought to people. And this one in particular, his kids really liked. So he remembered that Lillian, his wife, would read his girls the Winnie the Pooh stories by A.A. Milne, and hey, Miss Athena. So since Walt heard Lillian telling his girls stories, and he always heard them laughing and giggling, and he was like, oh, kids really like this Winnie the Pooh thing. So he wanted to make a feature film, and he acquired He acquired the rights to the book in 1961. So I said this movie came out in 1977, so there's a little bit of a gap, and we're going to get into why that is. So he acquired the rights in 61, and they kind of started immediately coming up with some ideas and getting some plans, and the first Winnie the Pooh story was going to be called Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. And they started working on that, and they got pretty far along, and then Walt had the idea one day, hey, you know what? We shouldn't make one Winnie the Pooh movie as a feature film. We need to do some steps. We need to introduce people, because American kids don't really know the story and these characters as good as English children did, and people in Europe, because that was where A.A. Milne was. He was in England. So that was where people were really familiar with these characters. So Walt was like, we need to get them really familiar with these characters before we throw an entire feature-length film at them, because they're going to be like, what? Who are these people? Why do I care? So that was their idea. And so instead of doing one big long movie at the beginning, they started doing some shorts. So they did the Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, which came out in 1966, and then in 1968 they released Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day, and then in 74 was when Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2 came out. So all three of those shorts, they were released with different movies, and then in 77 they combined them all into one feature-length film, which ended up doing pretty well, and people did respond much better because at that point people had fallen in love, as all of us have, with the Winnie the Pooh characters. And everyone is like a die-hard fan of one of the characters. My husband is Eeyore. Like, that is his man forever and always. And I have always been partial to Piglet. I've mentioned before that I was an Air Force brat. So I had a summer program one year that was military based, and we had to come up with a call sign. And if you're not familiar with call signs, that's like your nickname. That's basically all it is a nickname. And I was Piglet because I am little and nervous and I like pink. So Piglet was my call sign. I've always been very attached to Piglet. Who is your ride or die Winnie the Pooh character? Let me know. So anyway, I got sidetracked. But the movie was directed by a good friend. We just talked about him in The Sword and the Stone. We're going to have a couple of friends revisited from The Sword and the Stone video, and if you haven't seen that one, you can click right up there, the little eye. I will link that up there. You can check that out. But Wolfgang Reitherman, Wooly, he was involved in this one too, and he was kind of really responsible for the art direction that the film took. So if you like that when they open the book and you see the book and Christopher Robin is swinging on his little swing, that was one of Wooly's ideas. So just the whimsical, fun, playful things that you see, a lot of that is because of Wooly Reitherman. Someone else that you are going to remember as being involved in many Disney movies, but specifically in The Sword and the Stone that we've already talked about, the Sherman Brothers. They wrote the lyrics for all of the Pooh songs, and again, what is your favorite Winnie the Pooh song? Mine is definitely when Winnie the Pooh is singing about why he exercises, and it's so that he can work up his appetite, because my boy, I feel you so much, because I work out basically just so I'm allowed to eat more. Like, that's the reason. So me and Winnie the Pooh, we like this on that one. But what's your favorite Winnie the Pooh song? Because all of them are fantastic, and we have the Sherman Brothers, Richard and Robert, to thank for that one again. One other thing about the creation of the film, the art style. If you noticed that it looks a little bit different from some of the other Disney movies, that's because they took inspiration from Ernest Shepard, who had done the original illustrations for A.A. Milne, you know, the real sketchy, very soft looking, just black outlined figures that you kind of know as like the old classic Pooh. That was what they kind of were inspired by, but Walt was like, we're not gonna just straight up rip his illustration style. We're gonna make it Disney-fied as we do. So they made them Disney-ish, but then they still have that really dark outline, the dark ink around them that kind of gives them a sketchy look still. So paying homage to Ernest Shepard, but also making it their own in a way that is going to be familiar to Disney fans. So that's kind of the history and how that movie came to be. And like I said, they were the 3 shorts that were individually released, and then they compiled them after Walt passed away. Obviously, he didn't ever get to see the fruition of the idea that they wanted a full-length feature film of Winnie the Pooh characters, but they did make it happen eventually, and that was in 1977. So that's how that came to be. Now I'm going to talk about some of the little trivia tidbits that I think are really fun. Most of them are about the character actors. So people that you might recognize from my previous fun fact videos. So I mentioned Sebastian Cabot in my Sword in the Stone video. He played Sir Ector and kind of the narrator character at the beginning. He is also the narrator in The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, and he's also Bagheera in The Jungle Book. Someone else from The Sword in the Stone that we are revisiting in The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh is Junius Matthews, who played Archimedes. He is also Rabbit in The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. And I have mentioned before my man Sterling Holloway, who is just a master of the voice acting. He was the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. He is Winnie the Pooh, and he will forever be Winnie the Pooh. Jim Cummins is also a freaking fantastic Winnie the Pooh. But Sterling Holloway was the original, and he's also Kaa from The Jungle Book, Roquefort from The Aristocats. He's got a whole bunch of them that very easily identifiable voice, and you can definitely pick him out. But he's one of the greats that was involved in this one. So Bruce Reitherman is one of Wolfgang Reitherman's sons, and I mentioned before that he had 2 kids that played Wart. You know, lots of kids played Wart in The Sword in the Stone. He was one of them, and he also was Mowgli in The Jungle Book, so you can kind of pick out that voice. But he also played Christopher Robin in the very first released short film, which was Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. They didn't want to have different voices because from 1966 to 1974 there was no way that he was going to be able to voice all of the Christopher Robins. So in 1974, when that one was released, John Walmsley, who had voiced Christopher Robin for The Blustery Day, he also voiced, and he like re-recorded the voice for the other Christopher Robins in the other films, so that you could have consistency with Christopher Robin's voice throughout that entire movie, since it was going to be compiled into one. Paul Winchell, who played Tigger, actually ad-libbed a lot of his lines, and he's one of those people that they kind of just let do it because he was kind of good at it. And one of the most well-known lines that Tigger says is his little catchphrase, TTFN, ta-ta for now. And Paul Winchell just kind of like threw that out there while he was filming, and they're like, okay, yeah, we'll keep that. And that ended up being one of the most iconic lines that Tigger says. So you never know what little things are actually scripted, what are thrown in, because I definitely thought that was scripted. I can't come up with acronyms on the fly, and apparently he can. So I mentioned that the Sherman Brothers were responsible for the lyrics and writing the songs for The Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, all of the shorts that were included in that. But Buddy Baker was the composer, and he was the one who was in charge of the actual music that accompanied everything. And he did something really clever, which I had never noticed, but if you pay attention to the opening, the theme song, the Winnie the Pooh theme song, as they go to each character, there's a different set of instruments for each character to kind of give you the overtone of their personalities. They start off with Eeyore, and he is a bass clarinet. Piglet is an oboe. Kanga is a flute, and then as they say Kanga and Little Roo, it changes, you can tell the pitch changes, and it goes to a piccolo, which is for Little Roo. Rabbit is a clarinet. Owl is an ocarina, which I thought was a very interesting choice and very distinguished for Owl. And then Winnie the Pooh is a baritone. You can't really hear Pooh's that much because it kind of is going as he's jumping on the letters in the Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh. But it is a baritone for him. And I just thought that was a nice little touch. My final piece of trivia is one that I find really interesting because, as I mentioned, Piglet is my dude. They originally were not going to have Piglet in the movies. They were going to replace him with a more like American character, which is Gopher. So they filmed Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree, and they had Gopher, and there was no Piglet. And so when Gopher pops up and he says, "Not in the book, but at your service," he's meaning, I'm not in the phone book, but I'm here anyway. So you can't look me up. But he's also meaning I am not in the original book, and I'm still here. So he pops up and he says that, and originally that was gonna be the cute little sidekick guy. But they did eventually decide when they moved on to Blustery Day to bring Piglet in and keep him in the series. So that's all the history and the fun facts that I have about Winnie the Pooh. And since I ended talking about Piglet, I'm going to tell you about my embarrassing little situation that I had happen over the weekend because I became Piglet. I always joke when it's windy, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna blow away like Piglet does on Blustery Day, because you know he like grab his scarf and he's like floating away like a kite because he's so little. And I always am like, oh, the wind's so strong, I'm gonna blow over. I'm like Piglet. That happened. I was going into Lowe's for one of many trips, because when you buy a house, you suddenly live at Lowe's. I don't know why I bought the house, because I spend all of my time at Lowe's. But so I'm walking into Lowe's and the wind blew, and as it blew, I was wearing a hat and it started to blow off, so I reached to grab the hat, and as I leaned back, the wind blew again, and my feet came out from under me. I did one of those, landed flat on my hip, so this entire section of my hip is bright purple. I mean, it is really quite a statement. So I just completely wiped out flat, laying in the middle of the parking lot at Lowe's. My hat was blowing down the road. Some guy was chasing it. Cameron's looking at me like, what on earth just happened? Why are you on the ground now? So I got up and I kind of limp into the store, and we were just doing our shopping. Thought we had moved on. People came and found me to make sure I was okay, because of course that can't happen and have no one see you. So a nice older couple came up and they were like, honey, did the wind actually just blow you over? And I said, yes, I'm very uncoordinated. And they're like, oh dear, I don't think I've ever seen that happen. And the husband said, oh, you've achieved the weight that the wind actually can blow you over. Congratulations, you've done it. And I was like, no, I don't think it has to do with my weight. I think it has to do with the fact that I'm just clumsy AF. But that's nice of you to think that I am that small. So that is what happened to me. I straight up blew away, Blustery Day style. And now I am kind of limping around, and I'm not going to be able to wear a bathing suit for a month or two because I don't have anything that matches this giant purple spot that is taking up my entire left thigh. So that was a good time. So that is it for Winnie the Pooh history trivia and my embarrassing Blustery Day moment. So if you have any fun facts that I may have missed about Winnie the Pooh, let me know those down below. And definitely do let me know your favorite Winnie the Pooh songs and your favorite character, the one that you really identify with the most, because I love to hear what those are. And I will eventually get out my Dumbo history and trivia video. I also have coming up a Sleeping Beauty one. So look for those in the future. And if you have any suggestions in the meantime for other fun fact videos or anything that you'd like to see Disney or non-Disney related, let me know that down below. And I will see you guys in my next video. Bye, y'all.